My wife said to me one day, what makes the market go up and down like that? I said, a lot of things. Commodity fluctuations, inflationary pressures, financial instability, political tensions. She said, Norman, if you don't know, just say so.
And we're backstage in Dressing Room A at the Ponderay Pavilion at Northern Quest Casino. Meet up with an old friend, and I'll be careful in how I use the word old, Norm Crosby. Good to see you.
Nice to see you, old friend.
Old friend. And it's
old
been,
is just a
30
misnomer. It's
30 years.
It's a thought. That's right.
It's a thought, but it's not an action.
No, it's not a negative. People don't understand that age gives you something. It gives you wisdom, it gives you experience, and it gives you irregularity.
I knew that was coming. I was about to say I'm dilated to see you again after all these years. So you're still at it. You're still doing comedy.
I can't believe it, David. They call me, and I am so excited when I get the calls. I say, sure. I don't even ask what the date is, how much money. I just say, I'll do it, you know.
Well, because now it's not about money at this stage of your career and your life. It's just about working, isn't it?
It's about keeping going. It's about being active. It's about, I enjoy what I do. I don't think there's anybody in the theater that has a better time than me when I'm on stage working. I'm having fun, you know, and it's amazing. I keep getting calls, you know, can you do this, can you do that? And like I said, I do it, you know.
But why do you suppose that is? I mean, you're not on TV regularly anymore, and it's, you know, they say out of sight, out of mind, but yet they still remember you.
It's because I think I do something unique. I think that's the secret of sustaining in show business, is to have something that's like an identity, something that people can hook. It's a hook, you know, they can hook onto you, they remember you, because I'm the guy that screws up the words and talks funny, Rickles insults everybody. You know, if you have something that helps people remember you, then you sustain. You can stay, you know, it's been a long time since I've been, you know, that I've been working.
No, it's over 50 years.
At least.
At least.
Yeah. And I remember when President Madison called me and asked me to do a few things.
And you were there.
I was there.
But you were younger. You're a little bit younger. So start me back at the beginning, the Malaprops. When you went into comedy,
right?
Where did that idea of screwing up the English words, language, where did that come from?
It came from a need to be a little different. I was a local act working around New England, just out of the Boston area. And I was doing okay. I was working the little local clubs. You know, New England was a great place to start because you had all of New Hampshire, Maine, Rhode Island, all of Massachusetts. I was doing all the civic things. I would do the governor's birthday ball and the mayor's charity dinner and the police chiefs and the firemen. And E.M. Lowe, the man who owned the Latin Quarter in New York, was a Boston resident, and he used to see me at some of these functions. And one day, walking out of one of them, we happened to bump into each other, and he said to me, you know, you make me laugh. He said, I'm going to give you a week in my Latin Quarter. I said, wow. He said, yeah, you tell me when you want. He gave me his card. Call me when you're ready, and I'll give you a week in the Latin Quarter. And I thought about it. I was doing, at the time, everything I took from Ed Sullivan. You know, from Hackett. I was doing Hackett and Carter and Rickles and Shecky and Jan Murray and Red Buttons, you know, not stealing an act, but taking a joke, a line, something, and then putting it together my own way. But I thought, how can I go into New York and do New York stuff? You know, everybody will know it's not mine. I want to do something different. And
so in other words, you could get away with it in New England, but you couldn't go to New York and do it.
I could do it around Boston or Rhode Island or Connecticut. Who cared? But I'm saying, like I wanted to do something different. All the premises were done. Everybody talked about the same subject matter: my house, my wife, my car, my kids, the government, the economy. I thought maybe presenting the material a little differently. So I thought about how can I do that? What way can I present the material? And I was working at a club in Springfield, the Red Barn in Springfield, Massachusetts. The owner of the club was a good friend of mine because I worked there a lot. And he was a single guy, and he loved the girls that came up, the singers, the dancers. He hit on everybody. And I came up there. It was a weekend club. And some of the acts stayed over. And some of the acts would commute because it wasn't that far. It was 90 miles. A lot of acts went back and forth, for the 3 nights. And like I say, some stayed at the local hotel. So he came into my dressing room. I drove up with this little girl, Nancy. She was cute. And he said to me, "That little girl is adorable. Find out if she's staying over or if she communicates." I said, "Wait a minute. He doesn't mean that. He means, I thought, wow, that's a funny way to go. Maybe everybody can identify with that because I think everybody knows somebody that does that. They called them malaprops. People like you, writers, gave it that term, but I didn't even know who Mrs. Malaprop was at that point. But it was just misconstruing words.
Right.
And I thought about it, and I started to do it. I just thought it would be a funny way to go, so I started to do it. Unfortunately, the places that I worked, they didn't know the difference.
They thought
I would say things. I would say things like, when the Etruscans vanquished the Trojans, they pushed them out of Troja down the Agrinominon Valley into the Connecticut Turnpike. And they stabbed Brutus in the ventricle with a rusty shiv, and he got rigor mortis of his ducts. And he collapsed on the steps of the Acropolis, and they wrote down that he died from collapse. And I'd look out, and the people were going like this. I remember that from school. And the bosses would call me in the kitchen and say, "What are you doing, geography? Don't you know any jokes?" But I persevered, and the better places that I worked, the more the people understood that it was satire and burlesque.
So the hipper the audience,
exactly.
the more
the more intelligent the audience, they appreciated it. So eventually, I got to do the Tonight Show, and Johnny Carson flipped out. He said, it's a pleasure to see somebody doing something different with comedy. And that became my thing. I started to do Sullivan and a lot of shows, and everybody, I was known as the guy with the mixed up words. So
well, the malaprops come out so easily for you, and now as they have over the 40 plus years you've been developing it. But in the beginning, I would imagine it was a real challenge to get the words to come out wrong the right way.
Isn't it funny you say that, because it really wasn't difficult. I mean, my mind would flip the word, I'd know what to do. When President Johnson, for example, declared war on puberty. And,
was that Andrew or Lyndon?
But to poverty, right. When they said Johnson declared war on poverty, I said, yeah, he did. He declared war on puberty. The words are so close to the real word, then that's what makes it funny. Women need tenderness and affliction, and singers project from their diagram. I mean, it came easy, and it's been fun. It's just a fun thing for me.
I'm sure a lot of entertainers are involved in charities. It's a good way of saying thank you to you and giving back to the people. But I go to the clinics. I know the Sturgeons. I know the psychiatrists. I know the deviated septums. I know these people. I know the calibrated nurses. I know them. There's good stuff happening. A stagnant woman, a woman who is prenatal, can go into a hospital that has a laser beam. And if she walks by it, then she doesn't even have to take her coat off. They can 100% accurately predict the sex of an unborn fetal during agriculture. Did you know that? I'm serious.
Do you still find yourself thinking in terms of malaprops today? Although you've been doing it for so long, does it come naturally?
Today, it's the whole world is a malaprop. Today, we're living malaprops. Just awesome. We just finished the presidential election. I think it was the first time in our history the whole country hoped that nobody would win. But see, I'm using the malaprops now just as a remembrance. Mm-hmm. I throw them in every once in a while so people will remember, so I can retain that image. But I'm doing funny stuff.
It's interesting because I know that years ago in a review that I wrote of you in Atlantic City, and this is going back into probably the early 80s, I noted that the malaprops, you used most of them right up front in the show, kind of got it out of the way, and then for 45 minutes, it was nothing but good, solid comedy.
Well, thank you.
Why do you suppose that no other comedians, at least that I know of, have resorted to malaprop comedy? I mean, you had the market cornered.
I think it's because the industry, I felt that the industry protects protects people that do certain, identifiable things. I remember my wife and I watching The Tonight Show one night from home, and somebody said something, and Johnny said to him, "You've been talking to Norm Crosby." And that's the significance of what happens, really. I think the business does that. I don't think anybody would dare to do Don Rickles type of comedy,
right,
because they would know immediately that's Don Rickles. Although Don took it from Fat Jack.
Right.
Remember?
Exactly.
Jackie Leonard.
He admits it.
But he got away with it. He took it to the next level.
Mm-hmm.
Jack was not mean. Jack never embarrassed anybody.
Right.
He was funny. But Don took it to a point where it became...
It was embarrassing sometimes when he would do it.
As a matter of fact, I did a Friars roast in New York one time, and Fat Jack was the MC. Don Rickles was on the dais. He was just starting to get bald. And
so he was about 20.
And Leonard looked at him and said, "You little cucker, you not only took my act, you took my head."
Well, it's interesting that, when Rickles started doing insult humor, he took it to the next level. And whereas Jack Leonard was not doing it to be mean, Rickles in the beginning was doing it to be a little bit mean.
Oh yeah.
And yet today, Rickles' act is tame in comparison to someone like a Lisa Lampanelli, who does insults, but she's brutal.
Oh, yeah. She's brutal. Lisa, she's powerful.
Yeah.
But Don has mellowed considerably.
Or is it more like the people became a little bit more mellow? Because a lot of Don's act is the same today. The material is the same today as it was 20 years ago, and yet he gets away with it more.
Well, no, not so much that he gets away with more. I think people have become... is it more tolerant?
Or they've gotten to know
more
him.
Understanding.
Yeah.
They know what he does. They expect it. In the very beginning, he was startling.
Yeah.
He shocked people. But then as they got to know who he was and what he did, then it became, oh yeah, that's Rickles. Rickles does that.
Right.
Don't let it bother you. That's Rickles.
And it's like Rickles has said, if he did have a prejudicial bone in his body, he wouldn't be able to do that type of act.
Exactly. That's the same thing with we have inside jokes. If your ethnic background or your color or your nationality, whatever, you can do jokes with your peers that you can't do with other people.
Sure.
You can make fun of yourself and say things to people that if you're Jewish, you say to a Jewish guy, the Jews do this, and they laugh.
Right.
But if somebody else says it, it's painful. It's the same thing. But now they've accepted Rickles because Rickles does it, and nobody feels bad about it. Nobody is hurt by it. Nobody pays attention to it. That's what's made him more mellow.
You have to be able to...
What you've noticed,
right.
What you notice in the audience is not shocking anymore, not startling anymore. It's just, it's acceptable.
Right. And you have to be able to laugh at yourself, too.
Of course. But see, I think that's what happened. The audience has matured, not Don.
Right.
The audience has become more accepted, more aware.
Took 30 years, but they finally caught up to him.
They caught up to all of us. They caught up to everybody.
Well, you mentioned jokes that you can tell to other comedians and other performers.
Right.
The first thing that comes to mind is the Aristocrats, but we won't even go there.
Oh my God! Don't even go there.
We won't even go there.
They called me to do that, and Bernie Brillstein, who was my manager, never told me. He just passed. He said, "No, he won't do it. I don't want him to do it."
I would have loved to have seen you in that film.
Well, it's just somebody who was very daring put that thing together, because I can't imagine anybody coming up with an idea, say, let's take a filthy, dirty joke and have a bunch of comedians tell it, and we'll make a disc. If I were a producer, I'd say, are you crazy? But it was a big hit.
It was Penn Jillette and Paul Provenza, the ones who came up with the idea. And it really, you have to have the stomach to hear the joke first. But if your sensibilities aren't easily offended, it can be a funny joke.
I just did something for Bob Saget about the Penguins. He did a satire on the Penguin movie with the live penguins, and he did it with live penguins. But the voices were Louis Black, and filthy. The penguins are saying things to each other that people wouldn't say. And I didn't realize it, until he sent me one when it was finished. I said, my God. I was talking to another penguin. I was like a cousin. I said, "Gee, that was a great piece of tuna we had this morning." He said, "Yeah, it tasted a little fishy to me, but we, my dialogue wasn't anything like that." And then I heard it for the show. Wow.
So
that's another thing in comedy today. I mean, what is acceptable and what is allowed and what's on cable compared to when we were growing up in the business. We couldn't say hell on the Ed Sullivan Show. You couldn't say damn. You couldn't work at Harrah's in Reno or in Tahoe if you said anything that was the slightest bit off color. And now you put on a cable show and like, fuck.
Yeah, the times have changed and everything. Well, everybody has always said it's much harder to get a laugh working clean than it is to drop the F-bomb.
Well, especially now, with what the kids are doing in the comedy clubs. I go to the Improv every once in a while. Bud Friedman is a good friend of mine, and he asked me to come down and host an evening at the Improv. So I did it a few times, and I listened to these kids, one after another. I mean, if you took out 2 words that we all know, they would have no act.
They say there's no act.
They would have no act. They would have nothing to talk about. And they don't, it's not even an essential word in the punchline. If a word means something to the joke, if you need it to get the point across or the punchline, then I understand. But just as an adjective, this guy, that suit, that shore, that pants, that, and everything's preceded by F.
Right.
And I said, why? Why is that necessary? But I think it's because the kids sitting in the dressing room hear somebody in front of them doing it. There's 8, 10 comics waiting to go on in these comedy clubs. And they figure, well, I have to do it because he did it.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think even guys, young comics today that want to be clean have that handicap. They can't because there's 8 other comics on the show and they're all filthy.
Exactly. Well, it used to be the only place you could hear that kind of material told professionally was at a Friar's roast.
Exactly.
That's what the Friar's roast were famous for.
It still prevails, but I mean, I think it's done cleverly at the Friar's roast. It's humor. There's thinking behind it. It's not just throwing away words.
Who makes you laugh today?
Oh, George Carlin made me laugh. Stephen Wright made me laugh. It's Dom Herrera. I saw Dom Herrera the other night. We did a benefit in Los Angeles at the Directors Guild Theater. Dom, I was crying. He was so funny. But there's some young people that make me laugh. I appreciate, creative thinking, individual styles. I appreciate people who can come up with concepts that are a little new. But most of them, like I say, it's just, you go and hear a bunch of dirty words.
Yep. Before we wrap up, you had mentioned before the show that I want to talk about your throat. You had a little health scare about 6 years ago, didn't you?
I went to Las Vegas and I did a television special called the Victor Awards. It was for the City of Hope, and they do it every year for about 25, 30 years. They present awards to the best athletes in every sport, in every division. But anyway, I came back home and I had a husky throat. I said to Joni, I said, my God, for the first time in my life, half my life I spent in Vegas. I never had Vegas throat.
Vegas throat, right?
I got it. And she said, well, go to the doctor. I went to my doctor. He looked at my throat. He said, no problem. Your throat is clean as a whistle. But it persisted. So he sent me to an ear, nose, and throat doctor. He looked down my throat. He said, nothing. I don't see anything. And it still persisted. So finally they decided an MRI. They found a tumor under my tongue with cancer and a lymph node in my neck right here with cancer. So they decided on radiation. They didn't want to operate because it was too close to the vocal cords. And they said, especially I'm a humidor, and they didn't want to take a chance. So I had 8 weeks of radiation. Thank God they killed it. Everything is great. I'm healthy as a horse, except that it killed my saliva, the glands. And I have dry throat. I need keep sipping water.
Better you run out of saliva than run out of life.
Well, but when you consider the alternative, I think I'm okay. I don't mind sipping the water.
Hey, Norm, there's a big crowd out there waiting to see you. I want to thank you
David,
spending
it was a
some time.
pleasure. It was not only great talking to you, but it was so good to see you again.
You too.
Really.
You too. Let's hope it's not a like 10-year period again. Okay.
Divorces are rampant now because of what's going on, the tension and the pressure. A woman took her husband to court in Los Angeles. She said he hadn't spoken to her in 7 years. And the judge said, "Is that true, sir?" And the man said, "Yes." And the judge said, "Could you tell me why you haven't spoken to your wife in 7 years?" And the man said, "I didn't want to interrupt her."